Life before the factory. Imagine that. Our skate park was built 7 years ago. What was it like before that? I've been around our scene for 20 years now. There's about 13 years in there where there was no factory. What was it like? Here's the shot. Holy flashback. All right, YouTube, I'm excited for this one. What was life like before the factory? Seriously, I gotta go way back. Way back. Like digging through my gray hairs here. Seriously, life before the factory. What a great topic. Seriously, and I'd love to ask a lot of the riders around our scene here as well, what was life like before the factory? Because there's no arguing that park has put a serious dent into our local action sports scene here in Minnesota. And the amount of riders that have been cranked out of that place in 7 years now, I mean, it's I can't even like imagine that it's been that long. And we're at about 6.5, so at the end of this year it will be 7. But it's like, you know, look at like the growth of the place. So anyways, factory, before the factory. Some of the biggest, you know, memories of like parks and riding and stuff before the factory have been actually in backyards and backyard ramps. And that's one of the coolest parts of riding in general is you know, building your own stuff. And you know, the first ramp I ever built was actually my dad and I building a little grind box in the garage. And it was probably, who knows, it might even be winter back then. And I always had that little grind box. I learned little feebles and all that stuff on it. Then we had a mini ramp in the backyard. And so I had buddies with ramps, you know. There's been a ton of, we could do a whole video on backyard ramps around Minnesota. Like seriously, there's been so many. But a really close friend of mine, Darren, he had a 6-foot mini in the backyard, just right, you know, a mile away from where I grew up. And there's a lot of people who had different backyard ramps. And so the first park I ever actually went to was actually, that would have been, it could have been Third Layer. It could have actually been Third Layer. But also a big one was Green Acres. And Dan Sieg and his family actually ran that park. And that was around for about 2 years. And that's where, I mean, I learned literally like grinds there on boxes and double peg stalls on quarters. So that's how like early on this was as I was getting into riding. It was literally like the first skate park I went to. G-Shock, or not G-Shock, Green Acres ended up closing, and you know, it was around for a couple winters, and then it shut down. So then there was probably G-Shock shortly after that that opened up. I'm sure there's so many, like it's been so long, a lot of these are almost like blending together. But you know, G-Shock was a big one for sure. You had Showcase that was around for, I believe, 4 years. I think they had a 5-year lease and they ended up shutting down at 4. Then they had the Ali and Co. There's also J-Saw back in the day. I think those were, Ali and Co. might have been around, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. J-Saw, I believe, was 2. And also, man, the Third Layer actually moved to a second location, and they've been there for probably about 10 years. So parks have like come and gone over the years for sure. And it's crazy to think that we've had our own warehouse now for longer than, I'd say, any other park in Minnesota except for Third Layer. And Third Layer is one of the only, you know, few exceptions around the entire world. They're one of the longest running skate parks ever. And so if you look at, and you know, they're skateboarder owned and run, and they are a skateboard park, and they are bike friendly. They allow bikes, you know, a couple times a week. I believe every day during the summers. But as far as a you know, a bike only park or bike park, I mean, we're starting to become one of the longest. It's crazy to think about. But going back to life before the factory, also meant there was no foam and no resi, okay? And not only that, there was like no box jumps. I mean, that was one of the biggest reasons to actually make the factory. Get some big bike ramps, some big quarter pipes, big box jumps, and just have fun going fast and blasting ramps. And so before the factory, there wasn't much of that. You know, there wasn't. There have been trails over the years, and that opens a whole other topic of trails. Monkey Village, which I grew up not far from, there was MGM's always been around. That's evolved dramatically over the last few years here, and that's honestly the hot spot now. Kind of like the new Monkey Village, you know. Everyone's talking about MGM now. Cottage Grove is we got that bike ramp with Bell helmets. That's running now, and so but I remember like Mickey's trails back in the day, and up in the McGrath's had those jumps up there for a bit up north. You know, and then even local trails, just little, you know, you start in your hometown building little dirt jumps in the woods or whatever, and that's that was all, you know, before the factory. So I love all the guys out there still building the trails and stuff like that, because it's cool. Because now with the factory, I mean, that's been, you know, one of my babies over the years, and making sure that stays around every year. But you got your trail guys who are making sure trails are running every year. You've got you know, other parks in town making sure things are running. So together we have an insane action sports scene here now. And you know, back to before the factory, I think we've always had a good scene in general, but I do feel like the factory's added a whole nother side of riding that had been lacking in our scene. And you know, you look at the riders we have now, and a lot of the tricks and the stuff that people are doing now, you didn't see as much back then. And even, you know, before the factory, you look at, I remember when we were doing shows back then, and you needed someone to flip at a show. Who could flip back then? I could flip, AJ could flip, Nick Lucas could flip, Luke Hasty while he was still here. I mean, you can't even count a full hand of people who could flip back then. And we're talking, what, 7 years ago? Literally until the factory, there was only a few people in our entire state who actually went upside down. It was hard, like doing shows back then, it was hard because it was hard to find riders. You got to end a show with a flip, you know? And it's definitely expected, has been for a long time. And so now with factory, I mean, within 6 months of an opening, we probably had a dozen kids, a dozen people learn flips. The second year, I mean, that probably tripled. And now 5, 10, I mean, you can't even count them. I mean, there's so many people who've learned flips. And not only that, just box jump tricks in general. Tons of different stuff. Tail whip tricks, bars and tricks, like everything. It's been crazy to see the progression since the factory in general. It's just, it's honestly been nuts. And it is cool seeing all the riders starting to grow up and get older, and seeing all the different directions people go in their lives and stuff. And you know, thinking back to before the factory and all the friends I had from different parks and met at different parks and stuff like that, it is cool to see kind of the direction people go in life, you know, and what everybody's doing now. And the cool thing is, even like after starting the factory, like the factory's even, I'd say there have been riders who slowly got out of the sport, and the factory's actually inspired them to get back into riding, which is incredible. There's been a handful. One as of recently was Richie. Richie started coming out, and we got that trail line in there, and he loved that, you know. So it's just, yeah, it's crazy to think about life before the factory. Seriously. And I think the biggest thing is how less stressful my life was before the factory. Oh man, it's been a lot of work, but it's been nuts. It's been it's very rewarding when you see how many people are just having a blast there. I remember what it was like going to all these parks before the factory, going to all-nighters, going to sessions, going with your buddies, hanging out after the session, going out to eat afterwards, and now that's happening at a park that we created ourselves, and it's incredible to see that, you know, we've created a place for others to do and experience that now, and the kids, and it's been around for, I'd say, long enough now where it is normal. You know, the factory's just a normal park in town. For a while it was, you know, just this new tiny little place that, you know, a little alternative place to go riding, but it's normal now. It's crazy to think about. So anyways, thanks so much for anyone who's ever supported anything at the factory, because going on 7 years, we're at that point where let's make it 10, you know, let's go for double digits here. Let's hit 10 years and have a huge 10-year anniversary party. It's been a blast, and not only that, the factory's actually brought in pro riders from, I'd say, seriously, all over the world. There's been riders there we had Kenneth from Costa Rica, we've had riders from Australia, Europe, I'd say all over the place. And with X Games moving here, X Games has been moving here, right down the road from the factory. The factory is actually the closest indoor park to the stadium where X Games is happening. So there's gonna be, who knows who's gonna show up at the factory during X Games. Seriously, and it's gonna be nuts. Just more, it's gonna, I don't know, every year, every month, I mean, there's always something going on with that park, and I just can't imagine the stories we're gonna have in the next few months here. And I don't know, it's crazy. And you know, the factory has created a lot of opportunities for other riders in general over the years. And one of the coolest ones, who actually, someone just came back into town, Kenny left and joined the circus, the Ringling Brothers Circus. And that's one of the coolest things to think about, you know? And I feel like, you know, the factory was a big part of that, because like I said, there were no box jumps or anything like that beforehand. And to see, you know, Kenny get to the level of performing for the greatest show on earth, and them hiring him to do that for years, it's incredible to think about, you know? And you know, just all the kids over the years and everything, you know, there's pros now who've traveled all over the world now, and getting coverage of stuff that came right out of that park. So, you know, Colton's a big one. Everyone knows Colton now, or Colton Walker, and it's nuts. It is seriously crazy to think about, you know, day one, walking that first sheet of plywood into that park. And I don't think many people who walk into a skate park realize, like, this was one day empty. There was no park in here, you know? A lot of people think it just magically built itself. Anyways, I can ramble on forever. If you got any questions, leave me a comment. Love to hear from you guys. And if you do have any memories from life before the factory, let me know. Thanks again. Let's ride. Boom, baby.